So as I said, this is not going to be a scientific kind of research, the geology of Glacier National Park. In fact, when my friend and I were thinking about how to title this, I said, hey, how about two old gals and their adventures in an RV? And she says, I don't think so. But my friend Linda Maynard and I have taken several trips in our RV. This trip to Glacier National Park was in 2022. She purchased the RV because she wanted to bring her dog along on travels. And at the time, we went in late August, early September. We had only gone out twice for 2 3-day trips before we took this 3,000-mile, 3-week trip in the RV. So we did have lots of adventures learning about the RV. Our trip started in a northern suburb of Chicago in Lakeville, Illinois. We traveled a northern route, taking Interstate 94, going through specifically like North Dakota before we got into Montana, up into Glacier National Park, coming back around, and then we took the southern route, Interstate I-90, back home. And both of those interstate routes kind of, go through Chicago, so they were both very convenient. The little cars indicate places that we stayed. Our overnight stays could be anywhere from one night to a couple nights. And in Glacier National Park, we did 2 nights on the east side and 5 nights on the west side. So we had a few extended stays. Before actually going on the trip, we, started planning maybe in June, kind of deciding to do this trip. And so part of it is getting the RV ready, filling it with bedding, linens, what food we were going to bring, having, cooking utensils, toiletries, all of that kind of thing. Linda did all the planning of the RV parks. Given that this was very new to both of us, neither one of us had traveled in RVs prior to the 2 3-day trips we had. So we decided, even if it cost a little bit more, we were looking for sites, RV parks that had sites that were pretty level, and they usually tell you the grade or tell you whether there's a concrete pad or whatever, and which had all 3 hookups that we were going to want. Just because it would make life a whole lot easier. Some people boondoggle, meaning they pull into a Walmart parking lot and they don't hook up to water or sewer or electricity, and they just live off of whatever is in their camper. That wasn't for us. We weren't that adventurous, if I can say that. Um, I pretty much took care of whatever we're going to see along the way. I said, I'm not driving 1,500 miles and not stopping to see something along the way. I said, that's a long drive. And then we also needed to rent a car as we stayed in some places longer, because you're not going to hook and unhook your RV every time you want to travel. And we weren't going to have a car attached to the RV. And there's some parks that you can't drive an RV through anyway. So I took care of all the different car rentals. I think we also needed to consider what paperwork. We thought we might go into Canada, so we needed to make sure we had our passports, and Linda had one of the real IDs. Because we were bringing her dog, we needed to make sure we had the papers from the vet verifying he was vaccinated and things like that. So there was some pre-planning. Well, this is our home away from home, and this is from one of our prior trips. This is called a Class C RV. I slept in the cab above the driving cab, in this area above the driving cab. Linda slept in the back on a queen size bed. So it's a 34-foot RV, so rather large. The other side actually extends out. Once you park and have it leveled, the side extends out. We had a full kitchen with a stove, microwave, a
Wow.
refrigerator with a freezer, and a kitchen sink, bathroom with shower, toilet, and a bathroom sink. So we were pretty well equipped in terms of the RV.
Yeah. Huh.
Um, so Lucia, could you put yourself on mute, please?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Um, in terms of hookups, in general, I was pretty much in charge of the electrical hookup, that and the water hookup, which is just a hose. It hooks into whatever city water is available, and it's potable water. Linda was always in charge of the sewer. Uh, that was her choice, and I kept saying, I need to learn this. Wonder if someday you can't do it. So that includes both gray water that comes from sinks and showers, and the black water, which comes from the toilet. And you can see that just hooks into a little sewer system. Um, So, we kind of got down a little thing. We needed to really be cautious and conscientious about our travel. The RV gets about 7 miles to the gallon. And going across North Dakota, it was sort of like, okay, where are we stopping for the gas stations? And we kept seeing these signs that said Dawson, stop in Dawson for your gas. We thought, hey, this is great. It looks like the perfect stop for us. It'll be perfect timing. Well, we get there. Dawson is about 2 miles square, 2 square miles, has 74 people who live in it. It had a little park, a VFW, a bar, and this little Dawson grocery store that had one gas pump. But had been advertised for miles, and we needed to fill up. Everything was closed. There was no one, no attendant on duty or anything like that. So thank goodness we didn't have any issues. One of the places that we stopped was this Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center. So I-94 pretty much parallels the Missouri River. And so you're kind of following the Lewis and Clark expedition. And a lovely little interpretive center just outside of Bismarck. Um, 12-foot statues of Chief Shikeki with Lewis and Clark. Inside, it honors not only the Native American culture, but the fur traders and an overview of the Lewis and Clark expedition. About a mile away is a replica of Fort Mandan, where Lewis and Clark wintered over in 1804 and 1805. And this is where they met Toussaint Charbonnet, who was their interpreter, and his wife, Sacagawea, who I think a lot of us have heard about more than him. And because at that point, when the group left, she joined them and traveled with them as they went further upstream. And in the area, there's replica Indian villages on the Knife River, and we just took a quick stop there to see what it was like. But it was a nice little stopping area. Also in North Dakota, um, I came across this little site that said, hey, go down the Enchanted Highway. It immediately intrigued me. It starts in Gladstone at I-94. And what you see there is what you see here is the world's largest scrap metal structure. It's titled Flying Geese. The designer, Greg Greff, wanted to get people to come to his town of Regent, which is about 32 miles south from this point, as a tourist site. So along the route, he established various scrap metal structures. There's 7 of them in total. This is a 60-foot grasshopper, well as the 42-foot high Tin Man family. And when there's a total of 7 of these, there's a 40-foot trout in Fisherman's Dream. There's 32-foot tall scrap metal prairie chickens. There's something to Teddy Roosevelt. And then you end up in the town of Regent where there was a hotel and a place to eat. We didn't imbibe in any of that, but I just thought it was an interesting little place to start. Our destination for that point at that day was to Medora, which is near the border of Montana and South Dakota. And we were going to stay overnight so that we could look at Theodore Roosevelt National Park, just a little side trip. We stayed in Boots Campground. It was a little bit more, I'm going to say a little bit more rustic. There was no host on site, so there's no one to talk to if you had any issues or problems. And they had cabins there as well. But we were outside of Medora. You can see we're in the Badlands behind us. And the beauty of the site, which we didn't know to begin with, is that at night it was a dark sky site. And because it is a private campground, all the lights were turned off. They didn't have on a lot of security lights or anything like that. And so for 2 nights, we had this glorious view of the Milky Way. And neither one of us have cameras that capture that kind of thing. I don't have any views of it, but it was just breathtaking. We sat out there for hours, just bundled in blankets, drinking wine and watching the stars. It was glorious. Well, we decided to take a back route to get off of I-94 to get to the national park. So seeing lots of sunflowers, little oil derrick, until we got to the Teddy Roosevelt National Park. You can see that this is an area with sedimentary layers. This area once was an inland sea, and so lots of sediments would just settle down into the inland sea. It would evaporate. And then the Missouri River runs through here, and so you had erosion. So this area is formed by both deposition and then by erosion. It was called Badlands by both the Native Americans and the French. And what it really meant was it was an area not fit for people to settle in. It's semi-arid, but it's somewhat rugged and not the water isn't very good there and not very reliable. One of the things that fascinated me as a teacher that taught earth science was this layer of gray soil. This is bentonite clay, and without anything there, it's hard to tell. But this layer is 50 feet thick. So think of a 5-story building. And it was laid down by volcanic ash. The ash came from the volcanoes along the Pacific. So think about that, the ash traveling from volcanoes inland till it finally, the air currents settled and it settled down in this inland sea and built up to be 50 feet thick. So it just amazes me thinking about what those volcanic eruptions must have been like. Well, buried in this bentonite as a kind of just, it's because it's clay, as there's more erosion, it kind of, or I say flows, or comes down the hillside. There's these huge things that they look like cannonballs, or like bowling ball size, and they're called the concretions. They think they were formed pretty much like a pearl might be formed, and pretty much the mineral in them is hematite, which we can think of as the element is iron, and so you get, as they oxidize, you get that little reddish color. So that was pretty fascinating. Oops. And then these hoodoos. So again, you have layers, and some layers have more minerals that are more resistant to erosion than others. And so as this area gets eroded, not only originally by water, but by wind as well, the softer layers erode away and the harder layers remain. And so you get these mushroom-like structures, and they're called hoodoos. As you look out over the valley, you can see where the Missouri River flows because the cottonwood trees grow along it. So you could just see today a meandering Missouri River, where at one time this would have just been filled with rushing water from the river, carving out this landscape. This is part of the southern unit called Painted Canyon. And my friend Linda just loves animals. We did not see any animals in the northern unit. In the southern unit, we did come across a prairie dog town and buffalo, just a dozen of them along the parking lot. And again, all the cautions are there. Don't feed the animals, don't go near to them. And if you ever get out near Medora, it is a wonderful family site to go to. In the evening, we took in the musical. You can see it's nestled in the Badlands. There are 3,000 seats in this outdoor amphitheater. It is filled, they say, every evening for the performances. And it's just a wonderful family-friendly performance of singing and dancing, and it kind of talks about the history of the area. I truly enjoyed it. Next day, we were off, got to Billings, Montana, set up on the Yellowstone River in an RV park. And the next day, took in the Little Bighorn Battle National Monument. So we get a lot of history as well as geology in here. If you look up anything, it says, the National Monument site is about 1.2 square miles. But as you look out over the landscape, in terms of considering the Native Americans and their settlements and where they were traveling from, and the different military posts and forts and the military men that came to this site for the battles, we're talking hundreds of square miles. It really is very extensive. In the monument, there's a 4.5-mile road with little signs to read, interpretive signs. So it was very nice to go to. The monument, the initial monument that was there, honors the military, the American military who died there. This is the Battle of Custer's Last Stand, so to speak. Inside the fenced area is an area where Custer took his last stand, and monuments marking military who died there. In the 1990s, people, probably even before that, we began a little bit more conscientious about Native Americans' contributions and their role in history. And so this memorial was erected to the Native Americans in the area. Oops, sorry. And so we have this wire sculpture. And throughout the park, we did see some red monuments. Those are places where they could document that Native Americans had died during the battles that were there. I respectfully share this prayer tree with you. You can put pieces of cloth on it and offer prayers to the Great Spirit and for the souls of those who died, or even just prayers for people now. Next day we were off. We were on our way to Glacier. We had like 7 hours of driving ahead of us, but we did take a quick break at the confluence of 3 rivers, the Jefferson, the Madison, and the Gallatin rivers, which form the origins of the Missouri River. And so again, Lewis and Clark named this area, Jefferson for the president, Madison for the vice president. Gallatin was the secretary of the treasury at the time of their expedition. So it was a nice little just stopping point for us. And we got to our first site, our first place in Glacier National Park, which was Chewing Black Bones. This is on Indian land, which was, it was perfectly fine. You can see this was our first and probably the time we really were the most concerned about leveling the RV. It has levelers in it, and you just push a button and the little levelers come down and it gyrates a little bit and that levels off. And then you're free to open up the side, and you want everything leveled before you do anything like that. Well, it wasn't happy. It would not level. So we had to figure out, how to, putting in the blocks underneath it, how many we needed to put. So we were very proud of ourselves that it really didn't take us very long to figure it all out and get it leveled. You can see the campground. This was our first sunset in Glacier National Park. 2022, like many of the years, was just years of wildfires. And so the smoke that we were experiencing here was coming from Washington State and from western Montana. We could even smell the smoke. It was very serious wildfires going on. So Glacier National Park was established in 1910. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site today, but it wasn't a national park. It was a national park in 1910. So it's been around for quite a while, and I'll zoom in on some of this map. There's only two ways to really get from east to west or west to east across here. One is to be on Route 2 and go south of the park through Marias Pass. And the other is to go across the park on Rising Sun Road. Yeah. So we had those our two choices. I'll come back to an example of that map in a minute. One thing you have to get into the park is a day pass. Now, we had stopped and also rented an automobile because, again, we could not take the RV in there. You can only have vehicles of 21 feet in length and 8 feet wide. So we needed to have a car. But then you also need a pass to get into the park, and that exists today. It's a very, very busy park, and you get those passes online. Well, when we were looking in June, all the passes were gone. And we thought, oh no, we're not going out there and not be able to get in the park. Well, there's two workarounds. One is if you stay in one of the resorts, they will give you a pass to drive in. Well, we weren't doing that. And the other is to arrange to be on one of the tours, which are run by private companies. So one of the tours is called the Red Bus Tours, and they obviously take you in and tour parts of the park. The other one are the boat tours. And if you if you arrange for those reservations, it automatically gives you the pass to drive into the park to go on the Rising Sun Road and stuff like that. So we did that, so at least we'd be able to get in the park. So these vehicles that were used from the Red Bus Company date back to the 1930s. They have wood frames. They have been reconditioned and kept in perfect working order over the years. You can see that there's multiple rows for people to sit in, and each row has its own little door. The first of these vehicles were in 1910 as they started to drive people in to go to some of the early resorts. But all the vehicles that are running today are from the 1930s. And so they were very interesting, and they, take you around the park. So we were staying in this region on the east side of the lower St. Mary Lake. We met they called them the ruby red buses, the red bus here at St. Mary Lodge, and it took us about halfway through the park to Logan Pass, and then obviously coming back. This way, we didn't want to leave Corky the dog traveling with us in the RV for a full day or anything like that. So this was like a couple-hour tour. We were comfortable leaving him for that long, and he could not come on the tour. And the other thing that I don't think we had thought through very carefully is dogs are not allowed on any trails in the park. They can only be in parking lots. So it limited a little bit of some of the things that we could do. While we're here on the east side, there are a couple other places to go. One is Many Glacier, which I'll talk about, which is on the east side. And the other is Two Medicine. And these are both short roads into this mountain system so that you can take advantage of either trails or seeing some other sites. But we were going to just kind of, take the red bus tour going in. So on the red bus at the beginning of the tour, we're looking towards Mount Clement. You can see a glacier. Here's the going to the Sun Road. I think I was calling it Rising Sun Road. We're going to the Sun Road. At the end, there is a tunnel. This is the East Tunnel. There's a tunnel on the west side as well. The East Tunnel was the last part of this road to be finished. So uh, the Road to the Sun, Rising, it was commissioned in 1921 by Congress, but it wasn't finished until about 1933. And this was the very last part to be finished. It's a little bit over 400 feet long tunnel. It was the hardest part to construct and to get open. So you can see the roads are pretty narrow. The grayness in the sky. So we traveled back and forth across this road, across the park several times. So some of them seem kind of smoky. That was our first day. It was still pretty smoky. Other days it was a little bit less smoky. As we get into the mountains in Glacier National Park are formed from sedimentary rock. Again, it was part of this huge inland sea that there were deposition of sediments coming from all different directions and forming different layers of rock. But there's like over a million years of geologic change going on in this area. Some of it had to do with some of the movement of the plates on the western side of our continent and the pushing of those plates eastward, which caused thrust motion. So some of the areas, you do see a slant, and there was the North American plate on the east was thrust over part of the western plates. So you actually have um, older material, older rocks, um, older bedrock, some of it metamorphic rock, on top of younger sedimentary rocks. So that's part of the complexity that was going on here. There are some faults. There's been other uplift, and of course, lots of erosion due to the glaciers that came through the area. So you have glacial deposition as well as glacial erosion. So it's a very, very complex system in terms of how all of this was formed. In this image, if you look carefully, it looks a little bit wavy in here. So not only did you have that thrust motion where whole slabs of rock were thrust over other slabs of rock, but it also compressed the mountains. And again, we don't think about mountains flowing or having any flow value, but it compressed it. And so you get these wavy patterns as some of that bedrock was being compressed together. This is Heavy Runner Mountain. Again, you can see that wavy pattern that kind of is going through there. Heavy Runner was one of the Indian chiefs, and who was killed in a, let me just double check this for a minute. Yeah, he was a Blackfoot Indian chief, and he was massacred during, there were, multiple wars and battles, but he was massacred in one of them, along with women, children, and elderly. And there was such outrage because it wasn't just I shouldn't say just, but it wasn't a battle between Indian warriors and U.S. military. It was actually a massacre of young people and women, and there was outcry in the United States. So Ulysses S. Grant, who was president at the time, this is when he started peace policies with the Native Americans. So this particular mountain was named after that chief because he kind of, even though he was killed, it was sort of the beginning of some peace policies in the United States. Haystack Falls. There are over 200 falls in the park. Not most of them are not named, but this one, because it falls close to 500 feet and kind of flows over some steps and then just has this 500-foot drop. Clemens Mountain and Clemens Glacier. So earlier I heard Cynthia mention 1850 was the end of that small glacial period that we had. In 1850, there were recorded 150 glaciers in what's now Glacier National Park. Today, there are 25 active glaciers. So a huge decrease in, 150 years time. To be a glacier, First of all, it's not just snow. So there are snow fields where the snow falls, and you need that. But additionally, that snow, because of the pressure and the depth of the snow, it creates a lot of pressure. It actually recrystallizes the snowflakes into a metamorphic form of snow, which is known as glacial ice. So you need to have glacial ice to be a glacier. The other thing is, it needs to be the designated size is about 25 acres. And that 25 acres, because of the weight of it, it causes it to slowly move, but not just to totally slide down a mountainside. So the third part of a glacier is that it does flow. It does, it, again, it's a very slow movement. As you get more snow in the snowfield, the glacier advances or grows. And as you get either less snow or it gets later in the season where you don't have any snow, the glacier retreats and it's melting at the edges. So there's certain conditions in terms of considering what a glacier might be. And remember when Linda first wanted to go here, her comment was, "Well, I want to go and see the glaciers." I said, "I hope you realize you're not going to see land covered and covered and covered all over with glaciers." She didn't realize that. The Ruby Red buses stop at a couple of the lodges. This one is the Rising Sun Lodge and nestled in a little valley. It was built in the 1930s. And like most of the lodges today, it does have private bathrooms in it. However, there are no TV, no air conditioning, no telephones in these rooms. They try to keep with the era in which the different buildings were originally built. Behind it, you notice this mountain. We have Otokomi Mountain. Otokomi Mountain was named by George Grinnell for one of the Native Americans who had helped him while he was there. George Grinnell was in the area in the 1850s. He's considered the father of Glacier National Park. He was an anthropologist, a historian, a writer. He was interested in zoology. But once he got in this area, he became a conservationist and he got to know the Native Americans in the area and started recording all of that. And he named over 40 different features within this area that's now part of the parkland. So his name, Grinnell, occurs quite frequently. Well, he named this mountain in reference to his friend, Chief Otokomi. I'm going to point out a glacier feature here, though, as well. So, think about this being covered in a glacier. Um, as that glacier kind of slips down the mountain slowly, it starts to carve out. Notice this is sort of a bowl shaped. It's U-shaped, but it's also somewhat bowl shaped. And because it kind of ends at that point, you can see maybe some slippage and around it. This is known as a cirque. It's a bowl-shaped feature that's carved out by a glacier. Sometimes cirques have small lakes in them, sometimes not. This is Single Shot Mountain, named again because George Grinnell used a single shot to kill a mountain sheep. But it also has some great glacial features on it. Again, they think of this as razor thin edge. And if you notice, here's some edges coming down this way and down the side of the mountain. These are called arêtes. They are carved out. So again, think of this covered with the glacier kind of coming down. You sort of see a circle. And as the glacier keeps flowing downward, it's carving out the sides as well as the bottom underneath that glacier. And as you have two glaciers flowing somewhat side by side, they keep, there's thinner and thinner areas between them, and it forms this rock arête. So we finally made it to Logan Pass. This is the highest point. It's the highest point that you reach like in car or in foot, about 6,600 feet. There are several mountains, believe there's about 8 of them that rise up to about 10,000 feet. You don't drive to the top of those. So this is the highest point that people reach by car or bus. And then most of the mountains that you see are about 8,000 feet. Both the west and the east ends are about 3,000 feet. So you have a rise up to the Logan Pass of about 3,000 feet from either direction that you're going on. Logan Pass is also the beginning of the trailhead, multiple trailheads. So people go, I'm going to say that they go to Glacier National Park to do hiking. And again, we didn't do any hiking really into the interior. But this is where you see the lakes and the alpine valleys. Bear, many people see bear there. so we were not unfortunately taking advantage of any of those, but that's what most people would come here for. So we went back, had lunch, and we had arranged for a boat tour so that we could actually drive into going to the Sun Road, which allows us to anywhere that we wanted to go on that road for the day once we had our boat tour. Our boat, again, both of them are older boats that they keep in repair. We found out it was the last day of boat tours. Behind me in this upper image, you see St. Mary Lake, which is a glacial lake. So this also lasted a couple hours. And along the tour, we could see things like areas of fire damage. The area is left natural. One of the scientific studies and research that are ongoing there is how things come back naturally after these fires or after landslides and things. So, that's part of the studies that go on there. We saw Grinnell Formation. So remember, Grinnell is the father of Glacier National Park. And part of the formation that makes it so outstanding is you see this reddish hue that comes from hematite, the mineral hematite, which has the mineral iron in it, and it oxidizes. And so it turns kind of reddish. Oops, I forgot that I had a little bit of a close-up of that. We also bypassed Wild Goose Island. Now, Wild Goose Island has a little bit of Indian folklore behind it. There were two peaceful tribes living on either side of the lake, and the island was in between. And a young maiden from one side of the mountain swam over one day to the island, and a young warrior from the other tribe saw that maiden there, so he swam over to the island. And of course, they fell madly in love in that afternoon and decided that they wanted to be wed the next day. Now, their villages were not warring villages. They weren't against each other. They just didn't interact with each other. So when they both went back to their villages and said that they were going to do this, of course, the families were, oh, no, you're not marrying, anyone from over there. Well, they both left very early in the morning and came out to the island. And so members of both tribes came out looking for them, searching for them. And when they got to the island, all they found were two geese with their necks intertwined. So the legend goes that geese mate for life, and that the Great Spirit, as the young maiden and the young warrior came together on this island, the Great Spirit united them in life as wild geese. So this is Wild Goose Island. Um, you'll notice the color of the water. This also indicates, this aqua color kind of indicates that it is a glacial lake. So again, as glaciers move very slowly, they're finally grinding all that bedrock below them and on the sides of them. And sometimes they're just, picking up gravel and rocks and things like that. But if it grinds it to a very, very fine powder, it's called flour. And when the glacial flour gets into the waterways, it's reflected in this aqua color. Now, if you look into the water, you don't see any particles. In fact, on a different trip that had glacial water, I got a container of it. It didn't even settle out. I never saw it settle out at all. But it's the glacial flour that gives it this aqua color. Going to the Sun Mountain. So we were on Going to the Sun Road. There had to be a mountain named after it. And again, part of the legends of the area that the Great Spirit came down, Napi, one of the gods, came down to help people in time of need. And when things were going very well, he ascended back up the mountain, this particular mountain. And as he got towards the top, he disappeared into the sun. So Going to the Sun Mountain. Tone that down a little bit. On our trip, let me go back. On our trip, we went to the boat tour also took us to Bering Falls. Bering brothers, two brothers from London, came to visit this area. Again, most of the falls are not named. This is only a 25-foot drop, but it was a lovely little walk in. And one of the things that we noticed not only here, but in several other areas of the park, very reddish rocks, rust red, and some that were very, very green. Both of these rocks come from that Grinnell Formation. The red ones mean that when they were formed, they were exposed to oxygen, hence oxidized, and you get the red color. And the green ones, for whatever reason, they were never oxidized, but they're all from the same formation and the same rock. From our boat tour, you can kind of get a good view of Going to the Sun Road. They tried to keep it, if you didn't see cars on it, you wouldn't even really notice that there was a road there, and it was intentionally built that particular way. So again, it was Congress gave the funds in 1921, but the entire road was not finished until 1933 after the finishing of that final east tunnel. And something I found really pretty amazing, it was not totally paved from east to west until 1952, which in my mind isn't all that long ago because I was alive then. So to think about driving on gravel or the bedrock going from east to west, it's approximately, I get different readings. Some say 50, some say 51, 52 miles. Without any stops, it takes full 2 hours to go from one side to the other on going to the Sun Road. So a lot of twists and turns, and it's a very, very narrow road to begin with. To build it, often the engineers had to rappel down the sides of rock, place their dynamite, and get back up, and then explode the dynamite to start to explode the sides. So it was pretty dangerous work to get this finished. And we're going to end our tour on St. Mary Lake, with one of my favorite views that I took from the boat. You can see, not only the mountains, but a beautiful U-shaped valley. Well, again, we traveled both sides of the park. We were on the east side, and so we wanted to go to this area of Two Medicine. One place that we could go was Running Eagle Falls. Corky could not, he was with us in the car, but he could not go back on the little walk. It was about a half-mile walk that took us back to the falls. So Running Eagle is named after a woman warrior. Uh, Running Eagle, her original name was Weasel Woman, so she was probably happy it got changed. But as a young child, her father got sick, and she had gone with him and followed him into war several times. He died, and so she basically took his place as a warrior. Now, this was not common, and not expected at all. She is credited with saving a herd of horses that had been stolen by another tribe. She is credited with saving several of the warriors from her own tribe. Um, they consider her very strong. I think she even became chief for a while. And so she, received the name Running Eagle, and these falls are named after her. They're also known as trick falls because, as you notice, they're coming out from the middle of this formation. I'm told that in spring, when there's lots of meltwater from the glaciers, it actually runs from over the top. But obviously, there's no trick to it. It's just seeping between cracks and finding its lowest point of getting out. Um, excuse me. So we also traveled then to Many Glacier area. As we were driving in, first of all, the first part of the trip, so we were on Lower St. Mary Lake. The first part of the trip is across Indian land, or land owned by the Blackfeet Indian Nation. And we got up to the entranceway into the park, and there's a sign that says full. So they limit how many cars go into certain areas, and hence the passes that you need to even go on going to the Sun Road. Today, I understand that you even need to have a pass now to go into the Many Glacier area, and I think also into the Two Medicine area. So if you have plans of going there, you really do need to get these passes. By the way, I forgot to tell you, you can also get passes um, by 8 a.m. in the morning. They open up passes for the next day, and if you get a pass, it's a 3-day pass. And we both got up and got online at 8 a.m. and sat and just kept hitting the computer until we got a pass fairly quickly. So we did end up with a 3-day pass into the park. So part of what we were driving through on the Blackfeet territory, we came across again another glacial lake called Sherburne Lake. Sherburne was, he had opened a store. He was a white settler in the area. He had a small store, and I believe he ran fishing expeditions and things into this Many Glacier area, named for obviously many glaciers that you could see from this area. But what was interesting was we saw a dam on the lake. And again, normally, natural areas, you're not going to find a dam. Well, first of all, this dam was built in 1921. I guess it took a couple years to build. It became the main source, the reservoir of water became the main source for irrigation in parts of eastern and northern Montana, and flows into that St. Mary's Lake where we actually had our first campground. And from there, it's used for irrigation. And because it is still part of Native American lands, they did not have to take down the dam. So even though the dam has altered the area ecologically, environmentally in many ways, it's been allowed. Plus, it also provides irrigation water that's needed in the area. So as we look at Many Glacier, again, we're still by Sherburne Lake and not quite into the national park yet. We see a couple other features that are formed by glaciers. One is as glaciers flow downland and are carving out, and think about some of these things. I mean, we're carving hundreds of feet. So we're talking, you know, hundreds, thousands of years for this to occur. But they cause U-shaped valleys. And so I was always fascinated, as we were seeing these U-shaped valleys. The other thing is if it really carves out on at least three, maybe four sides across the top, it can form a horn. These are not really clear-cut horns, but a couple that look like they're in process of being formed and probably won't be now since the glaciers have melted so much. And again, as glaciers retreat or melt, any of the gravel that it collects or the small rocks that it collects in it are then released and set down as the water flows along the edges where it melts or at the end. So along the edges of what this would have been a river before it became the reservoir, the Shelburne Lake. As that river would have come from the glacier, along the edges where it melted, you get fine gravel. It's like a small hill. And this is a moraine. In this case, it's considered a lateral moraine because it's on the side of that glacial valley. And Many Glacier, again, somewhat of a cirque here, and maybe not as clear as the other one in the Otokomi um, mountain that we saw. So Many Glacier was the site of one of the first hotels in the area, Many Glacier Hotel. It's on Swift Current Lake. In the background, you see Grinnell Point, or Mount Grinnell. So again, named for the founder of the area. This hotel was initially built in 1915. So it was one of the first places that people would come to. They would take a train to West Glacier, which is a small town, and then they would take one of the red buses, would drive them out to the hotel. Today, the hotel has about a little over 700 rooms. Starting price of a room is about $250 per night. A magnificent, just nestled there, in the valley with just totally surrounded by all these mountains that would have held, I can imagine back in the early 1900s, just the view with all the glaciers on it. This is not my own photograph, you can see, but very pretty. And it's on Swift Current Lake, which Swift Current River was flowing from there, and that's what became dammed up to become Shelburne Reservoir. And again, with Mount Grinnell in the background. And there are tours that we did not take any boat tour on this lake. So it was time for us to move on. We had 2 nights over on the east side. We had arranged for 5 nights over on the west side. You cannot drive the RV, nor would you want to try to drive that RV through there. So we had to take the longer route, which took us 2 hours as well. So from Babb, which is the name of the closest town, around the southern point, through Route 2 through the Marias Pass, and then back over to the West Glacier area. So this is going through Marias Pass. It was named by Meriwether Lewis for a cousin's first name. So I believe it's pronounced Marias. I am not 100% sure. About halfway through, you're crossing the Continental Divide. There is a square that has monuments to, oh no, I'm not going to remember his name and I can't read it very clearly. Spalding, I think it is, who helped lay out the railroad to come through this area to go westward. There's this tall tower is a monument to Teddy Roosevelt and the Teddy Roosevelt Forest that's in the area. And so you have Monument Square, and it was a lovely place just to have lunch. Across from the park, you can see the edge of Glacier National Park. This tan area is a whole layer of limestone that they say exists throughout the entire park. So you can see it pretty clearly here. The other thing is, I talked about the thrust movement, and I didn't know it until I read it, so it's not something I think is very visible. This top layer actually thrust over the lower layer. And so again, that limestone seems to be part of that cutoff point. And here, maybe you can see a little bit better. So we arrived in the evening to our RV camp, which was about 2 blocks from the entrance, the west entrance into Glacier National Park. The next morning, we were driving out, and lo and behold, there's this huge line of cars, literally this extended 5 miles. Getting into the park, even with a pass, takes time. So if you do not have the pass, which is a 3-day pass, you can get into the park at before 6 a.m. After 6 a.m., you have to have a pass. Well, neither my friend Linda or I are early risers. And you can go into the park after 4 p.m. without a pass. But any other time, that morning rush to get in there, I mean, it was just a huge line. We were just amazed to see that many cars. Fortunately, our entrance to the park was just a couple blocks away. And so here's our setup in our RV park. You can see it was quite comfortable. We have our little lounge chairs outside. We have a little awning, and it was a pretty level, flat area with all of our hookups. Several of the parks we were at had dog parks, but this is the only one that had some other dogs in it for Corky to play with. And so again, worried that we wouldn't have a day pass, we arranged for a boat ride on Lake McDonald so that we could at least get into on the road to the sun and get into the park that day. So here we are at the western end. Lake McDonald is the largest lake in the park. It's 10 miles long, 500 feet deep. And again, carved out by a glacier. I find that stuff always just amazing. So this is our boat dock. This is looking sort of like towards the northeast. It's sort of on a slant. Ah, look at that U-shaped valley. I love U-shaped valleys. But what you see here that helps close off the lake, as that glacier that would have been here was receding, it would have been the bottom of the glacier transports all this, gravel and sand, and it deposits and it builds up. And so this is a moraine, and it actually now closes off the northeastern edge of the lake. It is still glacier fed, however. Um, I can't tell you how high it is. It's like it's a small hill, but you can see the height of, I mean, these trees are probably 30, 40 feet high. So moraines are not tiny by any means. And when we look to the southwestern edge, and no, this is the same day, all I did was turn around on the boat. So look at this view looking north and this view looking south. We had the smoke in the air again, and it just depends on how the wind is flowing, what you see. And so at the southern edge too, not only do you still see this U-shaped valley that's now filled with this lake, but it was closed off naturally by a moraine. So when that glacier was melting, it's called receding, there were recessional moraines. So this one would have been formed first, closed off, trapping the water. Glacier kept melting. The other one would have been formed as the glacier stalled further north. Like I said, this is 500 feet deep. It's very clear. Because of the coldness, it doesn't develop a lot of plankton. One of the things they pointed out to us was Howe Ridge. And again, you can see that you have a lot of just trees with, without any leaves on them. It was due to a massive fire in 2020, just kind of burned through the area. And today they have built, these are some commercially owned cabins that are rented out. Again, in agreement with the government, but you can just see the extent of the damage behind it, and they'll just let it come back naturally. And this is my closing to Lake McDonald. Again, I didn't do anything to this. I got all looking at my photos, and I kind of looked at it and went, holy cow, it looks like a watercolor painting. Anyway, one of my favorite views of Lake McDonald. Lake McDonald did have a lodge. This lodge was, I think, the first lodge. It was built in 1913, so a couple years before the Many Glacier Lodge. It has about 62 rooms in it. Again, all of these lodges, no air conditioning, no telephones, no TVs. They do have electricity in the rooms, and you do have private baths now. It was built in a Swiss chalet style, and the interior just this massive, the logs. It's 3 stories high. And so then, we took another day where we were just going to take a road trip on Rising Sun Road. I'm sorry, going to the Sun Road to see what was along it. So the first thing you see are McDonald's Falls. So this is going east, yeah, from west to east. You get a little higher in elevation, and you see the Sacred Dancing Cascade. Twists and turns take you into forested area. You're getting higher in elevation, so you do get different species of trees. You can even see that Mount Jackson here that rises in the background is higher than the tree line, has no trees growing on it at all. Birdwoman Falls, named after the fact that there are about 276 species of birds in the park, 144 nest in the park. I'm going to tell you now, we saw one bird flying. We saw no animals whatsoever while we were here. Not a moose, not a bear. I don't even think we saw any critters on the ground. Um, and I think I have a photograph that has a bird flying in it that I can't recognize. But it evidently has a lot of birds there, and this falls was named in recognition of all the birds. So one part along the roadway is something that's called weeping walls, where the waterfall just seems to be coming out between the rocks, and it just splashes down onto the roadway. Um, but it kind of, captures your attention for sure. And then just some vistas as we were driving through the park, looking down at McDonald Creek, so into the valley. One of the days that we were crossing, it was pretty cold in the morning, and as we got closer to Mount Logan Pass, which is about 6,600 feet high, we started seeing more clouds. And as we got up there, it was actually snowing. So this is in early September. The park generally is only open from the beginning of June, somewhere to late September. But the snow is really what determines whether the road stays open or not. So they were already getting snow there. As we drove, we could see the cloud that was producing more snow. When we had passed by this on a different day, there was not this much snow on this particular mountain. And we even came to the edge of the snow cloud, which we thought was pretty cool.
Ooh.
This is the West Tunnel. This tunnel was finished, I think, in like 1921, so a little bit sooner than the other tunnel. It's about a little over, well, a little under 200 feet long. In this tunnel, they actually do have some windows. There's two windows that overlook, and I didn't capture a very good view. This is Heaven's Peak on the left-hand side, and then overlooking the McDonald Creek and that particular valley. And just to give you a sense of the narrowness of the roads, now we're in a car. There is no pull off on the side. The rocks come right up to the road. And so no leeway. It's not this way the entire way. Some, ways open up into some valleys and things like that. But it's a very close area for driving. And be bear aware. Again, we never saw a bear. I think people who walked on some of the trails to the interior probably, there was a lot of stuff about bear spray and being aware of what to do if you came across a bear and things like that. We saw some beautiful little wildflowers, alpine valley swatches that are still here. Um, balsam root, thimbleweed, pink paintbrush, uh, this something about bear. I don't know if bear claw, but it was something with the name bear in it. Purple asters, and so just a few things. The mountain ash, which we were told attracts the bears. So when we were in areas that we saw this, we kept hoping we would see a bear, but not that we wanted to be by one, but we never did see a bear. Snowberries, mullein, fireweed, so a whole variety of flowers that were just blooming while we were there. And then some I couldn't identify. Um, kept looking, not sure what they are. I never really thought about documenting much about the trees that were there, but it has, a whole slew of different kinds of trees that are in the area. Larch and spruce, several different kinds of fir trees, several different kinds of pine trees. I believe this long, thin one is the lodgepole pine, which we saw a lot of. So something I wish I'd taken a little bit more care in documenting everything that we saw there. Then we decided, hey, let's go up and see the Canadian part of this. Well, again, you need to have certain documentation. We went through customs. We almost did not get through because you have to register online to get into Canada. And when he checked online, we had not finished our applications because it wanted an address of where we were going. And we just said, we are going into the national park. There is no address. Well, you have to have an address. Well, we're going to the national park. Well, you don't argue with, anyone in law enforcement, no matter where you are. And so we thought we were going to have to turn back. And he said, well, just put in the address of the hotel that's there. I said, well, we're not staying there. He says, doesn't matter. Just put in the address. We have to have an address. So that's what we did. And he let us in. He warned us that his particular port of entry would closed at 5 o'clock. If we missed getting through customs at that point, coming back into the United States, we would have to drive 2 hours to the east in order to get back into the United States. So we were very, very conscientious of our time. Um, the hotel he was talking about was the Prince of Wales Hotel, which is in Waterton Lakes, which is in the Canadian part of this montane system. So this is Waterton Lake. It was a beautiful view. It's actually a little town there. So there was church and school, a small residential area, a little business section. We had a beautiful lunch sitting right on the lake, sitting outside with this beautiful view. And then in the town, Cameron Falls. And again, look at the diagonals there of what, the pushing of the land. And I've read that if you get there more in springtime when it's really gushing, it picks up a mineral called argillite and it actually reflects pink. So again, that would be cool to see. Or there's just there too late in the season. Waterton Park, Waterton Glacier, is the first international peace park in the world. It was established in I want to say 1932, somewhere in the 1930s. And it was to reflect the peaceful, both of these, the Canadian and the US portions of the park were already national parks. So this indicated a joint venture to preserve the park, the species, both animal and plant, and that it was a cooperative effort between the United States and Canada. So I thought that was pretty cool. We also saw a lot of signs, so we did get back in time to get through our 5 o'clock, get across the border and back into the United States. But we had seen along the way multiple different areas as we were driving, different just statues, memorabilia, something to remember the Blackfeet Nation that lived in the area. So I just wanted to recognize that. Oops. We were then on our way home. Won't take a lot of time. Again, we had other stops. So Devil's Tower, the world's largest columnar structure. This is igneous rock that pushes up through sedimentary rock. We stopped in the Rapid City, South Dakota area so that we could see things like the Crazy Horse Memorial, which is still, so this is 2 years ago. The construction here started in 1948. This is 2022. You can see they are still doing the construction. They have no idea when it would be finished. Kolzak Zielkowski was the sculptor, and it's now into the third generation of his family who are continuing this sculpture. And it is the world's largest mountain sculpture and it will be, I guess it already is. You can see what it's supposed to look like. It's a sculpture of Crazy Horse and was proposed by his cousin that this be built in his honor. It also is a depository for all North American, oops, let me go back and quiet that. It's a depository for all North American, Native American, other tribes. So it has a wonderful little museum there. And then we were privileged at that time to see a Lakota hoop dancer. She started with 2 hoops, ended up with 24 of them that were strung out. And we won't watch her whole performance, but so a butterfly. And in the end, when she had 24, I think she was a caterpillar. So, and my friend Linda finally got her fixation on animals at Custer State Park. It is a bison center. And so bison roam free. And amazing. I mean, they're just amazing animals. There were just herds of them that are there. Have to be conscientious, watch your driving, and if they come up to the car again, staying in the car. A massive male, female with her calf. There's burros in here. They're feral burros. Again, that you were warned not necessarily to feed them, but I'm going to say everybody was. Carrots, apples, oranges. They are coming to search for the food. They come here and they nudge your car. Even if your windows are closed, they kind of nudge your window to try to get food from you. Never ceases to amaze me, Mount Rushmore at night. If you get a chance to be in the area, even if you've been there before. Linda had never seen it at night, and I says, "Oh, we have to go," because they have a wonderful ceremony in the end that they invite veterans down to the stage, and so it's very emotional. It's just if you haven't done it and you're in the area, highly suggested. Wall Drug, another place. No matter what direction you're coming from, hundreds of miles out, you'll see signs for Wall Drug. This was established in 1931 as a drugstore, a single drugstore, and it was advertising cool water as people were coming across, Dakota, into this area, and so people would stop. Today, it is a full block of retail stores as restaurants. Um, it's fifth generation people are running it. And inside it has the world's largest collection of Western memorabilia. And Corky enjoyed taking it in a little bit. We went to the Badlands, Badlands National Park, which initially was a national monument. So eventually evolved into this. And the colors here were much more glorious, much more outstanding than Teddy Roosevelt Park, which is a Badlands as well in the north. So the yellow, as I understand it, really is decaying plants. If there's a greenish tinge, it might be chlorite, the red from hematite, and the tans are from our limestone. So again, sedimentary rock that's laid down. There's some igneous structures that came up through it, creating some spires as a result of the erosion there. It's an ancient place of fossils for rhinoceros and wild horses, so there's active archaeology going on there. And again, our campsite was on a Native American lands just right outside. Here they are in our backyard for the night. We saw Dignity statue. It opened in 2015 in honor of Earth and Sun. It's an aluminum statue, 50-foot tall, kind of overlooks the banks of the Missouri River. So kind of brought us back to our Lewis and Clark connection. And everyone said, stop at the Corn Palace, but they say it with a smirk on their face. And it was like, okay, we thought we could have lunch there even. Well, you really can't. There were originally about 43 corn palaces. They're basically grain exposition centers around, especially the Midwest. This is the only remaining corn palace. And when it was built in 1892, the original building, it was to, show the richness of the South Dakota soil and the richness of the agricultural products there. Today, it has these corn murals on the outside and inside. These are actual corn cobs. They replace them annually. There are 12 different varieties of corn that provide the different shades of corn, and then they're nailed up there every year. I don't know what date they do this, but even on the interior, they have these corn cobs. So today it's a huge exposition center. In the past, there were radio shows that were done here. It's used for exhibits. They were preparing for a junior rodeo here this particular night. So I see why people had a smirk on their face. A place not to be missed, maybe just see it once in your lifetime, but interesting to see. Our last campground, and then we headed home. We had a lot of lessons we learned in our RV. Not only was it just a fun trip, it was a long trip. We were anxious to get home by the end. But different things about how to set up the RV, how to even turn on our night at Boots Campground in Medora. It was cold and we couldn't figure out how to turn on. We had never thought about how do you turn on the heat. So we had to learn simple things like that. We got into the shower one day, so it wasn't all that cold out, but the shower water was cold. We kept turning hot. Nothing came out. So that was a different set of things that we had to turn on. When you park, think about airplanes where they put little things under the wheels so the plane doesn't move. Well, you do that on an RV as well. Well, the thing we didn't realize, Linda and I put them on, I did them on one side, she did them on the other side of the RV. I put them, let's say I put them in the back of the wheel and she put them in the front of the wheel. Well, when we went to move the RV the next day, because they don't just pull out, you just drive forward and you release them. Well, we couldn't drive forward because we had one in backwards. So we lost a couple that way. So we learned, little things about RV as we were going on our trips as well. Anyway, thank you for listening and being so attentive during this presentation.
That was wonderful.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Like I said, it wasn't going to be this huge scientific research thing. Just
scientific.
You kept it.
Two old ladies in an RV.
You had enough scientific stuff in there.
I did. I'm very interested.
Very informative.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Something
have any
really
questions for
interesting
Judy?
too.
We have any questions for Judy?
For me.
Where next?
Well, we want to do
I don't have a
Utah.
question. I just have a comment that I just felt that all of the geologic content that you provided was done in such a painless way. I mean, it's obviously you've been doing this for many years, and your presentation was just fabulous because, I mean, this was not pre-recorded. You were doing it live, and
Right.
I'm so impressed. Thank you so much, Judy.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. for those
Fabulous.
comments. Yeah, it comes, I think from my teaching, you know, you want to gently ease them into what the geology is.
Well,
Just
I
to get the feel.
certainly learned so much, and I think this is a most fascinating lecture for people who don't live in the United States, because I think that when once it's on the SWG YouTube, it will be really interesting for the entire community, but I think mostly for the international people, because you saw so much, and I concur with Barbara. You know, you say you were not a scientist. My goodness, you filled us up with the most amazing knowledge, and in such an easy way. I mean, I've never been, you know, a glaciologist or something, but you really opened up an enormous amount. So congratulations, really, for the intelligent way to be a tourist,
Oh,
which is what we the geographers should be anyway. I have one question for you or for your friend. How easy or difficult it was to drive that gigantic beast?
It's like we both drove. It was like driving a big truck. It wasn't all that difficult. It doesn't accelerate very quickly necessarily because it is a heavy vehicle. It had a
Mm-hmm.
Ford truck engine in it, I think is what's in there.
Okay.
So it handled pretty well. I mean, because I drove, we switched off driving.
Well, I presume again because the roads in the US are
Yeah.
fairly large. I'm thinking in
Yes.
Europe that would be absolute a nightmare to
Right.
wherever we
Yeah.
went. Thank you so much. That was really great.
Well, thank you, Maureen Pia.
If I could just say thank you so much, Carmen, for including the rest of us
Mm-hmm.
in this presentation. I think it's just a huge addition to the programs for SWG to be able to be included in the ones that you're organizing in Chicago. So thank you so much.
Well, I think we've kind of perfected the online, and we would have been hybrid, but that was this last year's practice. So now that we have it pretty good down, it's easy to invite others. It's we wanted just to test it among ourselves first. And I think, you know, as Maria Pia said, that this is great for those outside the states, but also for those in the states. It's this area of the U.S. That she went through is usually called the flyover. Everybody just flies over it. No one actually drives through it. And there's so many exciting things to see throughout the Midwest and the middle of the country. So it is great to have these type of presentations for everyone. So are there any other questions?
Yes,
Maria Pia?
a last question about glaciers, because obviously you saw quite a lot in Glacier National Park, and I just wondered, is it the same as everywhere else in the world? The glaciers are actually retreating in that area?
Yes, there are some areas, some of them in the Arctic and Antarctic, that glaciers are advancing. In other words, they get more snow in the snowfield each year, and so that pressure pushes the glacier to move forward as it creeps down in elevation. So there are, I don't remember how many, it's been a while since I had the exact number. It's in the 20s, I think 20 some are actively growing glaciers. So not everywhere in the world has glaciers that are retreating, but the bulk of the glaciers are retreating. And it's seen as both that there is, just what you might look at is regular climate change, things that, I mean, we know that there have been different glacial periods throughout history with or without people, but the most recent, since 1850, it's been a more severe decline, and so a lot more of the anthropomorphic effect, people effect on what we're putting
Topological.
into the air. Right? Yes, thank you. That they feel there's a lot more effect that the climate is heating up more quickly, and so there's also that effect. I forgot to mention that in the last 50 years, of those 25 active glaciers, they have shrunk by 80% in the last 50 years. So those 25 active glaciers that are in Glacier National Park are only, a small portion of what they were 50 years ago. So it's really accelerated a great deal in that particular area of the world.
Thank you.
And I think Cynthia had a question for you, Judy. What's your guys' next trip? You guys have another trip
Oh,
planned?
yeah. Well, initially we wanted to go to Utah. There's 5 national parks in Utah. We weren't able to go in 2023. And this past year, 2024, we went with another, a couple, a man and woman who are good friends with us. And we were going around Lake Michigan. And Linda got sick, so we didn't record or document as much stuff. So we don't know. We keep saying, okay, where are we going to go next? Because she has this huge RV and she wants to use it. But we really don't have anything planned next. But that was the initial intent, that we would go one big place, every year, and do a presentation. She usually presents with me when we do this presentation.
That was fabulous. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Something
Yes.
that I wanted to do.
Well, it all started, because I teach in Northern Illinois. There are a lot of glacial features in Northern Illinois and Southern Wisconsin, but we never teach kids about them. We teach them about forests, and we teach them about prairies, and we teach them about oceans. And I said, what about all this glacier? So I really got, 30 years ago, I got interested in teaching about, the impact of glaciers, but continental glaciers more for our area, so we could travel around and see them. And of course, when you do that, you also learn about the montane glaciers. And as you notice, some of the words do come, they're French, cirque, arête, they're coming from the French Alps. They were named in the French Alps originally. So, yeah, the same features do exist worldwide. And not
And
only
all
features,
things considering that Illinois was under 2 miles of ice
Yeah.
a few thousand years ago, I'm just as glad that some of them went away.
so.
Thank you so much. This was just great. Thank you for bringing us along.